if you'd confirm that you heard that, but also how you evaluate that statement given some of the comments you're making about her clemency plea.
And we'll take your question and then we'll answer and wrap up.
I just wanted to ask what you all make of Congressman Comer's back and forth with the Clintons on closed door tape deposition versus public testimony, and if you're worried that this might derail what's going on right now and lead Republicans back to pursuing contempt.
Yeah, on the Clintons and Trump, she did say that she is happy to talk on the record to confirm that there was no wrongdoing on their part. I think that is part of her campaign, again, to get a pardon and get support from both parties. That's why she's mentioning Clinton too as well. But they were very explicit on saying she'd love to talk on the record to absolve the Clintons and Trump.
I'd say about the back and forth part of things, Secretary Clinton made it clear. If you want to do this, let's do this out front and in the open, right? And it seems like they don't want that to happen, because what they want to do is they want to go behind closed doors and then come out with whatever spin that they want to put on it and have it be a he said, she said. I also do believe that this is yet another way of them trying to distract and hopefully trying to get Democrats to say, well, never mind, we don't want to talk about it if you're going to go after the Clintons. Again, for us, this is not about partisanship. This is right versus wrong. And frankly, we've not seen anything that would have made me believe that Secretary Clinton, of all people, should be coming in front of them in the first place. So this is about getting to the truth for us. And we understand that if there are names mentioned, that we should follow that evidence. But we do know that Comer is playing games, because if he really wanted to get to the bottom, you would start with the person that actually has the information, which would be Pam Bondi. Pam Bondi is the first person that should have came in front of our committee to answer questions about why it is that she violated our subpoena. Instead, he's ignoring her violation. And then once we ended up with the Epstein Transparency Act, she has violated the law as it relates to that. And he still doesn't have anything to say. So I want people to be very clear-eyed. They are playing games right now. And this is all about shielding and distracting from the president of the United States, who is absolutely mentioned in those files. And frankly, we know that he had already been sued prior to him ever entering office, where there were allegations that he sexually molested a child. This is on the record. Now, granted, the case didn't go through and whatever, but we know that the allegations were there way before he even took office the first time.
And I'll just wrap this very briefly and just say this. The Clintons are cooperating. There are no grounds whatsoever at this point for any kind of contempt motion. Their deposition is scheduled, as far as anyone knows, it will occur. I just want to say this. The fact that Andy Biggs walked out of that room and delivered the message that Ghislaine Maxwell wanted was exactly what she wanted to send to Donald Trump. Clearly, he was acting as her messenger, because we were told explicitly to not repeat things that were said in that room. It's very clear she's campaigning for clemency, and it's very clear that Mr. Biggs delivered the message to Donald Trump. Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay, that was the first one.
Yeah.
I mean, just purely for entertainment purposes only, all things stated here, just speculation. We're just thinking out loud. I got new boots, new book. Let's go. These are words I will never, ever, ever forget, because these are words that came out of years and years ago, decades ago. I thought you were a psychic, but you are dead wrong on this one. Funny how you can be right about everything, but you're not right about this. Trust me, this went on and on and on for a long time. A back and forth between a friend of mine and myself. It had to have been in the late 90s, maybe early 2000s. What was this conversation about? Michael Jackson, and one of my theories, what the world calls conspiracy theories, but I like to refer to as truths that the world isn't ready yet to understand, believe, or even know, but truths that, given time, will be exposed and shown to be
7 minutes,
truths.
guys.
I am 49 years old, and the world called me a psychic clairvoyant medium my entire life. I denounced that in 2022, but I have always known things, and I still do. Queen of the conspiracy theory, but it's always been my discernment, my pattern recognition, and the nudge from the Holy Ghost. That is how I've always known. They've not been premonitions, they've been discernments, and that's exactly what I had about Michael Jackson, which actually cost me a friend. They thought I was disgusting and vile to believe that Michael Jackson was not guilty of the things that they had said he had done. Accusations that Michael Jackson did horrible things with. I didn't believe it, not for a second. I see the world differently. I see patterns. My critical thinking skills, are off the charts. The second the world labeled this man, what they said he was doing, I knew instantly that's a lie. How did I know? Because I recognized his heart. His heart looked very familiar to me because it's the exact same kind of heart that I have. The heart of a child, a trusting, loving, compassionate, kind, and caring, squishy heart. I could spot it a mile away. And if this is an absolute proof, hands down, that he never did a single thing to a little, and if this is an absolute proof, well, I don't know what else the world needs. Corey Feldman came out very verbally, very publicly, years and years ago about what was really going on behind the scenes to children in Hollywood. Many people called him crazy. He had gone over the edge. He must be on schmugs, but he was telling the truth all along. He had been a victim in Hollywood since a very, very young age, far younger than he was here in this photo. And as a victim of what Corey had been through repetitively during his young years in Hollywood, knowing that and knowing what he had been through, do you think he'd ever hang with him if the accusations against Michael were actually valid and true? Or Macaulay Culkin, the young actor who has notoriously been through the same thing at a very young age, far younger than he was in this picture. Do you think he would be hanging with Michael Jackson for years and years and years? He even said publicly, Michael Jackson was not, yet the world never listened. And the world believed heinous things about Michael Jackson, things that were never true. Rumors about Neverland being, well, let's just say 1,000% the opposite of what Neverland really was. A safe haven, a sanctuary, a place where children could be children and they could be safe. Michael Jackson was never what they said he was, just like I said decades ago. But just like my friend, the world chose not to believe the truth. But just like the rest of the world, my friend chose to go with the narrative that, well, powerful and evil people in that industry about Michael Jackson they chose to spin. Why? Because clearly he would not play along. I've said it a million times, that's Satan's favorite go-to. When he can't get to them and sees them as an imminent threat because they won't play along, well, if he can't unalive them, he'll unalive their character. And it's always the same. Funny how guilty people will blame and claim that somebody else is doing exactly what they are doing. It's a tale as old as time. Michael was never what they said he was. He was a safe haven for the people who had been hurt. He was a safe place for those children. He was a safe place all along. The second I heard these rumors long, long ago, I knew that they were lies because I see the world differently. I see it in patterns. I use critical thinking, but I recognize things a lot of people in the world don't see. And I see them long before the world can open their eyes or the truth is actually revealed. And I recognized his heart because he has a heart as squishy and childlike as mine. And he would never hurt a fly, let alone a little. Hollywood also has a funny way of, people being unalived mysteriously. People like Michael, Prince, all of the others with the squishy heart that just simply would not play along. They die mysteriously, tragically, and always at such a young age. Some I believe that Satan got to before that they could speak. Anne Heche, Kobe Bryant, Chris Cornell. But then there's Prince. And then there's Michael. When I heard the news of their passing, I had a very funny and familiar feeling rush over me. The same kind of feeling I had when Princess Di passed away. And although I was only 1 year old when he passed away, as I've grown, I've had that feeling about him too. Who? Elvis. There are certain celebrities that tragically have been lost that I have a different feeling about. The kind of feeling inside of your heart where you know somewhere, somehow, they're still here. And they got before Satan could get them. Kind of got where, they didn't get got at all. The staged kind of tragedy to escape this evil. Let's just say as somebody who has these abilities, I don't feel death with any of them. I know Elvis is still alive. I know Princess Di is still alive. And I know Prince is still alive. Ever since 2009, I've always known that Michael Jackson is still alive. Roll your eyes, mock and scoff, call me a conspiracy theorist, that's fine. I've gotten that my entire life. But you want to know what else I've gotten? Although it might take years and sometimes decades, eventually I've gotten apologies because eventually I'm proven right. Michael Jackson knew there was a threat and he did what he had to do. That warm, squishy heart that I see in him, let's just say I can still feel it beating because like so many others, I know that Michael Jackson's still alive. Just like Prince And just like Princess Diana, and
They all
exactly
think-
just like Elvis. But do celebrities who know that they're in an imminent risk of threat, the celebrities like Michael and Princess Di and Prince and all of those ones who would not play this evil game, did they shuffle off this mortal coil in a staged event before the bad guys could get them first? I don't know. You tell me. I mean, he was married to Lisa Marie Presley, the daughter of Elvis Presley himself. So let's just pretend that Elvis is still very much alive, was still very
Yeah.
much his father-in-law. Oh, the tricks and the tips he could have taught him. There's no such things as
I had a
coincidence. But there
restream.
is such thing as
Telegram
evil.
was giving me a
When
hard
you're playing
time.
chess with evil, with Satan, sometimes you have to
Change
be
wrestling
unalive
tonight.
in order to, well, say checkmate. But what do I know? I'm just a crazy conspiracy theorist who needs to go make a phone call to an old friend. Oh, how I love apologies. Because once again, decades later, I've been proven right. And Michael, if you happen to see this, I'm so very grateful you're finally being vindicated. I'm so very grateful the truth has finally been said. You never deserved to be painted as a monster. Not only the same kind of monster that you had been running from yourself, but the monster you sheltered so many children from, protected so many littles from, and loved so many littles enough to give them a place like Neverland where they would know they were safe. You, my friend, are an angel, and you have a beautiful heart that is gold. And now the rest of the world finally knows it, because what is done in the dark will always come to light, and the good guy always wins. I used to
Another good one, important one from Auntie there. This is a new one, I think.
United States Capitol Police officer is about to drop a
3.5.
gun magazine on the ground moments before election theft protesters make entrance into the Capitol. Pay attention to his hands as he will quickly toss it to the side. There it is, a magazine for a handgun. Do you see it? Now watch as another officer walks right beside the magazine, almost stepping on it, while another stands feet away
This
and
is a
doesn't
new
notice a
clip, I
gun
think,
magazine
guys.
laying on the ground in the heart of
never saw it.
democracy. Now this officer seems to be looking towards the protesters who have assembled at the door to his right. What logical reason could he have for having dropped the magazine and left it there? Why has the other officer not alerted him of the dropped magazine? Now he inches back towards the handgun magazine. He is within just a few feet of it now. Now we will see two additional officers running towards the door with the first two officers as some of the very first protesters make entrance into the Capitol. All four ignore or don't notice the magazine. There is another item on the floor that is believed to be a gun by some and a glove by others. This man will also ignore the magazine laying on the ground. As the protesters enter, the police move backwards near the magazine. During the pushing and shoving, the
do you
magazine
think of
seems
this
to get
one, you
kicked
guys?
backwards and eventually kicked aside by one officer, as another item appearing to be a handgun is noticed by one of the protesters. He actually picks it up, looks around, steps towards the police, then points a gun towards 5 police officers. Did the thrown magazine fit this gun? Miraculously, the cops don't react. He doesn't seem to know what to do next. He keeps looking down towards the ground as if he is missing something. He will meander around for a minute, then pull out a hat and put it on. He looks at the ground a few more moments and then leaves the area. What did the camera aiming towards the door show, you may ask? A window is smashed. Presumably this is the gun we saw earlier being dropped through the broken window on the ground. An issue throughout all the January 6th footage I have noticed happens here. It's called data morphing. It happens all throughout the footage and at the most consequential times and places throughout the day. Like right now, one of the first break-ins at the Capitol on January 6th, the most consequential day in American history, making the footage useless at
This
certain
is definitely
points.
a new one. I never saw this one. Yep, another important one there. Got a 30-second one.
Guarda, hanno rubato il furgone.
This is
Guarda,
Italy, you guys. Italy.
guarda. Cristo santo. Hanno fatto scoppiare in diretta. Guardali, 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 guardali. Guardali, guardali.
It was armed robbers attack.
Stanno rubando il furgone, guarda.
Cash in.
Guarda, guarda, guarda,
A
guarda,
man on
guarda,
a
guarda.
highway.
Guarda. Hanno rubato il furgone. Guarda. Guarda. Cristo santo. Hanno fatto scoppiare in diretta. Guardali, 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 guardali.
$5 minutes.
Today, disgraced financier Jeffrey Epstein's former associate and maybe girlfriend, Ghislaine Maxwell, said she would not answer questions unless she gets clemency. She appeared virtually for a closed-door deposition with the House Oversight Committee. The deposition lasted less than an hour. During the deposition, Maxwell invoked her Fifth Amendment right. Fifth Amendment reads in part, quote, "No person shall be compelled in any criminal case to be a witness against himself." Now, Maxwell is currently serving a 20-year prison sentence in a Texas prison. She was convicted of 5 related counts related to sexual exploitation and abuse of minor girls in a scheme involving, you know who, Jeffrey Epstein. Republican Ohio Congressman, Chairman of the House Judiciary Committee, and member of the House Oversight Committee, Jim Jordan, joins me. Nice to see you, sir. And I guess,
Good to be with you,
I would have advised her to take the fifth, and unless she gets clemency. I mean, that seemed like good legal advice. Maybe not what you guys wanted to hear.
Well, yeah, we expect this. I did not go. Chairman Comer ran this deposition. We got plenty of deposition to do in the Judiciary Committee. But yeah, I mean, this is what we expected. This is, I think, probably what her counsel, as you said, instructed her to do, and that's exactly what she did. And look, I leave it up to the Justice Department when it comes to this broader issue to get the information to the Congress as the law requires, and to do it in a way that's consistent with what the court ordered, protecting innocent people, because based on some of the things we've seen, it looks like there's some information that's gotten out that hurts people who didn't do anything wrong. So, but I trust the Justice Department to handle this in the appropriate way, and I think they're doing that.
Well, I think it'd be the more interesting. Obviously, everyone wants to hear the Clintons, and they'll be testifying later in the month. But there's a deposition coming up that is extremely important. I think the Les Wexner deposition, which is the guy that made a ton of money on Victoria's Secret, the Limited, and everything else. And Jeffrey Epstein was his financial advisor and made a ton of money. And everyone thinks, and Wexler has said that he got swindled by Epstein, but that's that money that enabled him to buy planes, islands, and everything else. So, I mean, I think he'll be an interesting deposition.
Yeah, we'll see what comes with that one as well, and how Mr. Wexner and his attorneys advise him to handle the questions that he's going to get.
All right, Pam Bondi, the Attorney General of the United States, will be testifying on Wednesday. Is that before Judiciary Oversight?
No, that'll be in our committee. So we got her, this coming Wednesday. I think the big contrast is, here you got a Justice Department that actually focused on getting the bad guys. Just think here in the capital city, murders are down, robberies are down, carjackings are down, all because of the Justice Department and President Trump's Justice Department focused on the things I think the American people expect the FBI and the Department of Justice to focus on, versus what happened in the previous administration, where it was spying on parents at school board meetings, where it was investigating pro-life Catholics. They even surveilled a priest in the Richmond field office, even surveilled a priest there, a Catholic priest. I mean, that's the kind of garbage in politics that we're going on. Now you have someone who's focused on getting the bad guys.
Well, what I'm very appreciative of is that she and the FBI and the prosecutors, Justice Department, they went and got one of the guys responsible for Benghazi, and people have forgotten about that.
Yes.
But they killed 4 Americans, and so I like it when when we go out and we don't leave someone on the battlefield, so to speak. We go out and get them, the ones that should be brought back here. Nobody else went out and got this guy.
Yeah, and they've done that several times. I think it's like 5 or 6 just in President Trump's first term that this Justice Department has gotten. And you're right, this individual who was responsible for the murder of Ambassador Stevenson, Ty Woods, Glenn Doherty, I mean, these guys were courageous people who gave their life for our country. And then to go get the guy who was responsible for this, another feather in the cap, I think, of this administration and this Justice Department. So, yeah, that'll be some of the things we talk about, as well as this whole issue, Greta, where in these sanctuary jurisdictions, ICE will send a detainer notice saying, we know you got a guy in there who's an illegal migrant and also has done some crime. If you're going to let him out, give us a heads up. And in places all over this country, accounting for almost a third of the population in these sanctuary jurisdictions, they won't work with federal law enforcement and they will release bad guys to the street. We know in the state of New York in last year, 1 year's time, President Trump's first year, 7,000, where there was actually a detainer notice filed. They failed to honor that and released a bad guy into the street. What we're trying to find out is how many of those bad guys went out and did some crime because they wouldn't, because they're a sanctuary jurisdiction, work with federal law enforcement. We think that's an important area, particularly when we see what this environment that's been created in Minneapolis where these tragedies happen. We think that's an important area that'll come up in the hearing as well.
All right, Wednesday before House Judiciary Committee with the chairman, Jim Jordan. Thank you, sir.
You bet, Greta. Thank you.
Okay, Jim Jordan on Newsmax.
Aiden.
Hi, Aiden. So what do you want to say?
So I want to sign this petition because I want to see Alberta free, prosperous, and independent. I, like many people in this province, was disappointed in the results of the last election. And I believe that people in the East, for whatever reason, are object to the change necessary to make our country wealthier, to allow our children to have a better future, to allow our children to have the opportunities that our parents and our grandparents had. You know, I've seen time and time again a federal government that is hostile to Alberta, that is hostile to our industries. My dad works in oil and gas. So when I see that Stephen Guilbeault doesn't want Alberta to have a pipeline, I do take that personally. I take it personally when you have a supply management industry in Quebec, which negatively harms Alberta and Saskatchewan dairy farmers to keep a cartel going. I am disappointed about the fact that we have an equalization system that is meant to ensure that Alberta remains a colony, that Alberta is forced to pay up and shut up and to get nothing out of Confederation. And that is why I am here to sign this petition today.
Wow. Thank you. And how old are you, Aiden?
I'm 18 years old.
18 years old.
In December.
Wow, that's amazing. Well, thank you. Thank you so much. You've said
pleasure.
it better than any of us.
Okay, a kid out of Canada there. I think this is a new one, Lucy. I think. I'm not sure.
I want you to Google entire family missing in Theodore, Alabama. Bet you didn't know about that, did you? You want to know why you didn't know about that? Because these people are not celebrities or their family celebrities. In fact, they may possibly be illegals. So the rumor started around Alabama that ICE took these people, right? The entire family. And ICE has said they have absolutely nothing to do with this. They have nothing to do with it. Guess how long they've been missing? And y'all ain't heard nothing about it on the news since January the 30th. So the father of the 2-year-old that's missing, Juan Garcia, he's been questioned but cleared, even though people say that he was not a very good person to these people. So there's a mother and 2 children missing. The mattress is missing. There's blood everywhere, cash. It looks like a horror scene. Haven't heard anything about that, have you? And you probably wouldn't have until I'd put it on here. Go to Google it. For all of you that came at me because I was talking about how Guthrie got all this national exposure, but people that go missing, women that go missing that's been unalived by illegals, they get no exposure. Well, hey, bitches, here's some people that it's looking like were illegals that went missing. And y'all ain't in no damn uproar about that. I don't see nobody spreading this on national news. You know why? Because ICE didn't take them. So it's not a story. Because none of y'all give a...
Yeah, I might have played this afternoon. Sorry about that.
Good afternoon again, guys. I want you...
Okay, this one's a 2-minute one.
Ireland cautioned that it is running out of jet fuel. The warning comes as the U.S. tightens its grip on the communist-run nation's oil supply. Canada's largest carrier said in a statement that jet fuel is not projected to be commercially available at airports as of Tuesday. The shortfall is set to last from February 10th through March 11th, according to a notice to air missions published late on Sunday. The Cuban Aviation Corporation published a short statement on Monday morning, just hours after the notice was issued, but made no mention of the fuel shortage or flight cancellations. The Cuban government did not immediately respond to a request for comment. Air travel appeared normal at Havana's Jose Marti International Airport on Monday, according to a Reuters witness. But some travelers called for urgent measures to be taken in order to avoid flight cancellations. Fuel shortfalls are not new to Cuba, which has long struggled with supply issues, and many airlines already have plans in place to deal with them. Similar crises have prompted many carriers to refuel in nearby third countries, including Panama, the Bahamas, the Dominican Republic, and the U.S. Cuba has historically relied on Venezuela to provide much of its jet fuel. The Caribbean island nation has not received any crude or refined products from its top ally since mid-December, when the U.S. moved to block the South American nation's exports. U.S. President Donald Trump has since vowed Cuba would receive no more oil from Venezuela and has threatened to slap tariffs on any nation sending fuel to Cuba, effectively cutting off the island's supply.
Canada Update News.
Thoughts out. And also I just wanted to explain that I'm competing for Great Britain at this Olympics, and I did at the last Olympics to honor my mom because she's British. I'm half British. I was born in England, but I'm also half American. I grew up in the US, and that's where I went to school. I did my first 2 Olympics for the US and won a silver medal for the US. That's where I live now. So yeah, I care about the US and I care about what's happening there. And I'm saying all this because the other day I posted a photo with my thoughts on ICE, and that photo has since gone everywhere. It's been shared all over the place, and I've gotten a ton of messages, and most of them honestly have been supportive and encouraging, people thanking me for speaking up and using my platform. But a lot of the messages have been awful. People telling me to kill myself, threatening me, wishing that they'll get to see me blow my knee or break my neck during my event, calling me slurs. Like, it's insane. And maybe that's the price you pay for speaking up and using your platform. And so maybe this video is just going to invite more hate and vitriol, but I think it's important to say what we feel and stand up for what we believe in and stand up to injustice. And I've been really proud seeing other athletes doing that. Hunter Hess, Michaela Schifrin. I think it's inspiring and it's important. And I also think that there's a lot of nuance to it, and I feel like sometimes people forget that. So I just want to remind everyone that, like, you can love the US and be proud to be an American. I am, and still think it can be better, and still think that the country can improve. And just because you love the US doesn't mean you stand with this administration and stand behind their policies and their legislation and support the things that they support, because I don't, and I do not support ICE, and I think it's absolutely evil and awful and terrifying. There have been US citizens that have been murdered in the street, executed in the street, and the officers are essentially acting with like impunity because their identities are covered. There's no accountability. It's really scary. They're racially profiling people, rounding up Black and brown folks and kidnapping them, putting them in unmarked vehicles with no arrest warrant, no probable cause. They're being held without any sort of due process. It's crazy. It's scary. And people are being sent to countries that they're not even from. And US citizens are being caught in this. And I think overwhelmingly the majority of the people being targeted are good people, hardworking people that are nonviolent and have no criminal history and just came to the US seeking a better life. And that is literally the foundation story of the US. We are a country of immigrants, and that's the American dream. And I think people forget that sometimes.
Okay, sorry about that one, you guys, but we gotta listen to the bad and the good. It was a short clip. Let me know if you want me to play this one, you guys. It's 6 minutes.
15 files, eh? How about them
I'll
files?
stop it. Just let me know.
Some people would say, do be like that. And it is. A lot of people are feeling vindicated after years of struggling, myself included. Because these files, they confirm a lot of things that I've been talking about for the last 10 years. And people before me have been talking about for decades. So it is good news, definitely, that these files are finally coming out, and that a lot of this information is now.
Silver Surf, are you first time in chat? Be respectful, please. Thank you.
Basically public information. So that's good.
Thank you. Is this one okay?
That is good.
I don't like this one. I don't know what he was talking about that one, you guys. Sorry about that one. I got good ones, don't worry. Okay. Let's do.
They take 80 million and walk away. The city stopped them. The money's just
17
gone.
minutes,
And that's not even the real crisis. Hi, I'm Clara Monroe. While city officials were dealing with federal agencies raiding their accounts, the new comptroller was reading through the books left by the previous administration. What he found? $3.76 billion in expenses that exist, that are happening right now that nobody put in the budget.
I asked what
Shelter
state you're
costs,
from, Silver Star.
overtime,
I'm from
special
Michigan.
education cases, all real, all costing billions, all missing from the official numbers. Before we show you exactly how New York City hit a $10.4 billion deficit and what happens when the person responsible for the city's checkbook says the previous team engaged in chronic underbudgeting, make sure you're subscribed with notifications on. When comptrollers expose fiscal disasters 4 days into their term, we break down every page of their report so you see what's coming for your taxes before City Hall admits it. Hit subscribe now. 4 days ago, Comptroller Brad Lauer released a report with a phrase you never want to see, not seen since the Great Recession. Let me show you what he found. 3 numbers define this crisis. $3.76 billion. That's how much spending the Adams administration left out of the budget for fiscal year 2026. These aren't new programs. These are existing obligations the city knew about but didn't include in budget projections. $10.4 billion. That's the deficit projection for fiscal year 2027, which starts July 1st, 2026, less than 5 months from now. $80 million. That's what the agency seized from city accounts in February 2026 because New York owed money from previous disaster reimbursements. Let's start with the $3.76 billion in under-budgeted expenses for the current fiscal year. This isn't a revenue shortfall where the city collected less money than expected. This is spending the city knew was happening but didn't put in the budget. Comptroller Lauer's report lists exactly where that $3.76 billion is going. Overtime costs are running significantly higher than budgeted across police, fire, and sanitation. Public assistance enrollment is higher than projected. Rental assistance programs have more users than anticipated. Shelter costs are exceeding budget projections by hundreds of millions as the system runs over capacity. The Department of Education is losing more special education due process cases than expected and paying more for mandated services. And the Metropolitan Transportation Authority contributions increased beyond what was budgeted. Add all of those categories together and you reach $3.76 billion in expenses for fiscal year 2026 that exist but weren't included in the budget. That's not a small accounting error. That's systematic underbudgeting of known costs. When a city underbudgets by $3.76 billion in a single year, it means either the budget office made catastrophically bad projections or leadership directed them to present unrealistic numbers to make the budget look balanced when it wasn't. The comptroller's report uses the phrase chronic underbudgeting, which suggests this is a pattern, not a one-time mistake. Now let's talk about fiscal year 2027, the $10.4 billion deficit year. That deficit comes from 2 sources. First, the $3.76 billion in under-budgeted expenses from fiscal year 2026 don't disappear. Overtime costs don't suddenly drop. Shelter costs don't magically decrease. Second, new costs are hitting in fiscal year 2027 that didn't exist in prior years. The biggest new cost is the state class size mandate. New York State passed a law requiring New York City to reduce class sizes in public schools. That means hiring thousands of additional teachers. When the mandate is fully phased in, it costs the city over $1 billion annually. Fiscal year 2027 is when those costs start hitting the budget in force. The city also faces federal funding cuts. Supplemental Nutrition Assistance Program administrative funding got reduced. Emergency housing vouchers got eliminated. Section 8 housing voucher funding got terminated for new vouchers. When federal funding for new vouchers stops, families who would have qualified for help don't get it, which increases pressure on city homeless shelters and rental assistance programs. Here's where it gets particularly brutal. In February 2026, the agency directly withdrew $80 million from New York City bank accounts. This wasn't a negotiated payment plan. This was the agency determining the city owed money from previous disaster reimbursements and taking it. How does a federal agency take money directly from a city's accounts? Federal law allows agencies to offset money owed to them by seizing funds owed to cities from
I got one on New York with her, and then I got 2 Billy Beans, a 13-minute one and a 21 coming up the next 3 videos.
Other federal programs. So if New York City is supposed to receive federal transportation grants or Medicaid reimbursements, the agency can intercept those payments and keep the money to cover what the city owes. The $80 million seizure wasn't a surprise to city officials. They knew the money would eventually be collected, but the timing and method, direct account seizure rather than negotiated repayment, signals that federal agencies are taking a harder line with New York than in previous years. When federal agencies stop negotiating and start seizing funds, it indicates serious concerns about the city's fiscal management. Now let's look at fiscal years 2028 and 2029, because the deficits get worse, not better. Fiscal year 2028 projects a $13.24 billion deficit. That's 10.9% of total city revenues. Fiscal year 2029 projects a $12.36 billion deficit, which is 9.9% of total revenues. When your deficit exceeds 10% of your total revenue, you're not talking about trimming budgets or finding efficiencies. You're talking about fundamental restructuring of what the city provides and how it's funded. To understand how New York City reached this point, we need to look at what happened during and after COVID-19. The pandemic caused massive revenue collapse, but the city also received unprecedented federal aid. The American Rescue Plan and other federal programs sent billions to New York City to cover pandemic costs and revenue losses. The problem is what happened after the immediate crisis passed. The city used temporary federal money to fund ongoing programs and expand services. When temporary money funds ongoing expenses, you create a structural deficit the moment that temporary money ends. Federal pandemic aid is now gone, but the expenses it was covering remain. Simultaneously, the city's costs increased due to factors beyond its control. Health insurance premiums for city workers jumped. Pension contributions increased. Debt service costs increased as the city borrowed money during the pandemic. And then there's the immigration impact on city finances. New York City is a sanctuary city. 43% of New York City's workforce is foreign-born compared to 18% nationally. The city's construction industry, accommodation sector, food service, healthcare, and numerous other industries depend heavily on immigrant labor. The city also provides shelter and services to asylum seekers. Federal law requires cities to provide emergency shelter to anyone who requests it. Those costs have exceeded budget projections by hundreds of millions of dollars annually. I'm not making a political argument about immigration policy. I'm explaining the fiscal impact on New York City's budget. The comptroller's report identifies specific budget categories where under-budgeting has been most severe. The overtime shortfall hits immediately because paychecks go out biweekly. The city can't just decide not to pay overtime that was already worked. The Department of Education due process case costs reveal a structural problem. Federal and state law requires schools to provide appropriate education for students with disabilities. When parents believe the school isn't providing appropriate services, they can request a due process hearing. If the hearing officer rules in the parent's favor, the city must pay for whatever services or placement the officer mandates: private school, specialized therapies, one-on-one aids. The city has been losing more of these cases than budgeted for, and the average cost per case has increased. The shelter system under budgeting is perhaps the most visible manifestation because it affects how the city responds to homelessness. New York City is legally required to provide shelter to anyone who requests it. That's a court-ordered mandate from decades ago. The city can't turn people away from shelters even when capacity is exceeded. All of these under-budgeted categories have something in common. They're mostly mandatory spending or legally required obligations. The city can't decide to just stop paying overtime that workers already earned. The city can't eliminate public assistance programs without violating federal and state law. The city can't refuse to provide special education services that hearing officers mandate. That's what makes chronic under-budgeting so damaging. When you consistently underestimate mandatory costs, you're setting yourself up for fiscal crises because you can't easily cut the spending when projections prove wrong. Now let's talk about what a $10.4 billion deficit in fiscal year 2027 actually means. The city has three basic options to close that gap: raise revenue, cut spending, or borrow money. Let's examine each option and why it's complicated. Raising revenue means increasing taxes or fees. New York City already has some of the highest taxes in the nation. When you're already at high tax levels, increasing them further risks driving residents and businesses to leave the city. New York lost population during the pandemic. If tax increases accelerate departures, you can actually reduce revenue instead of increasing it. The city also faces restrictions on what taxes it can raise without state approval. The city can't just impose new taxes or significantly increase rates without Albany's permission. Cutting spending sounds straightforward until you examine what the city budget actually pays for. Education consumes the largest share, mostly personnel costs. You can't cut the education budget by 10% without eliminating thousands of positions. The state class size mandate actually requires the city to hire more teachers, not fewer. Public safety spending is politically difficult to cut. Health and social services spending is mostly mandated by federal or state law. Libraries, parks, and cultural institutions are easier to cut politically, but they represent a small share of the total budget. You could close every library and eliminate every park program and still not close a $10.4 billion deficit. Borrowing money requires finding lenders willing to buy New York City bonds at interest rates the city can afford. If deficits continue growing and the city doesn't demonstrate a credible plan to close them, credit rating agencies will downgrade the city's bonds. Downgrades increase borrowing costs, which means more of the budget goes to debt service instead of current operations. That makes the deficit worse, which can trigger additional downgrades in a vicious cycle. So if raising revenue is difficult, cutting spending is difficult, and borrowing is limited, what actually happens? The most likely scenario is a combination approach. Modest tax increases on high earners or property owners, targeted spending cuts to discretionary programs, hiring freezes that reduce city workforce through attrition, service reductions that aren't technically cuts but reduce quality through longer wait times and reduced hours, delay of capital projects like infrastructure repairs, use of one-time revenue sources like asset sales to cover ongoing expenses. That combination approach spreads the pain across multiple constituencies, so no single group bears all the burden. But it also means the deficit doesn't get solved quickly. It gets managed through a series of incremental adjustments that keep the city operating but don't address underlying structural problems. The Comptroller's report emphasizes that these deficits exist during a period of overall revenue growth. The city isn't facing revenue collapse. Revenue is growing, just slower than expenses. That's what makes this a structural deficit rather than a cyclical problem. Structural deficits exist even during growth periods because spending commitments exceed the revenue base. Structural deficits don't fix themselves through economic growth. They require either revenue increases that exceed current growth rates or spending reductions that bring costs back in line with revenue. Let's talk about what happens over the next 6 months as fiscal year 2027 approaches. The city must pass a budget by July 1st, 2026. That's less than 5 months away. The Comptroller's report gives the City Council and public advocates ammunition to demand transparency about expenses and revenue. The mayor will likely emphasize federal funding cuts and state mandates as the primary drivers of deficits. The City Council will likely demand higher taxes on wealthy residents or corporations to close deficits rather than service cuts. The mayor will likely resist significant tax increases. That's the standard political divide in New York budget battles. What actually passes will probably be somewhere in the middle. Some tax increases, some spending restraint, some borrowing, and some accounting maneuvers that make the budget look balanced on paper while pushing costs into future years. 3 indicators over the next several months will show whether New York City is stabilizing fiscally or spiraling toward crisis. First, monthly revenue collections compared to projections. Second, federal funding announcements. Third, credit rating agency actions. If Moody's, S&P, or Fitch downgrade New York City's bonds, borrowing costs increase and fiscal flexibility shrinks. Comment your New York neighborhood or borough and tell us what budget impacts you're seeing already. Are services being reduced? Are fees increasing? If you're outside New York, comment whether your city or state is facing similar budget pressures. Federal funding cuts, healthcare cost increases, and pension obligations aren't unique to New York. Here's what we know for certain from the Comptroller's report released February 2nd, 2026. New York City under-budgeted $3.76 billion in expenses for the current fiscal year. The city faces a $10.4 billion deficit in fiscal year 2027. Deficits exceed $12 billion in fiscal years 2028 and 2029. The agency seized $80 million from city accounts in February. The comptroller calls this chronic under-budgeting and states it's the first time since the Great Recession that deficits this large have appeared this late in a fiscal year. New York City isn't unique. It's the largest example of a pattern affecting multiple cities where pandemic-era federal aid let cities maintain or expand services. And now that aid is ending while costs continue rising. The structural deficits created by using temporary money for permanent expenses don't solve themselves. Make sure you're subscribed and notifications are turned.
Okay, that was a good report there for New York. She has one out of North Carolina, will be 25. Then next two after that is Billy.
I don't think it needs to be.
February 2020, the Federal Emergency Management Agency shows up at New York City's bank. No warning, no negotiation. They take $80 million and walk away. The city can't stop.
Wait a minute, hold on. Shoot.
And right now, North Carolina is staring at $60 billion in hurricane damage with those automatic tax cuts about to kick in. Hi, I'm Clara Monroe. Hurricane Helene hit North Carolina in 2024, and the destruction was catastrophic. Entire communities wiped out, thousands of homes gone, infrastructure destroyed. The state asked the federal government for $19.2 billion in disaster aid. As of December 2025, they've received $2.4 billion. That's it. Another $4.6 billion is approved, but hasn't been sent. And while North Carolina waits for federal money that may never come, state law is about to cut billions from the budget through automatic tax reductions that nobody can stop. Before we break down how a state recovers from a $60 billion disaster while simultaneously cutting its own revenue, make sure you hit subscribe and turn on notifications. When states face the impossible choice between disaster recovery and tax policy written years ago, we show you the math that explains why services disappear and who actually pays the price. Subscribe now so you don't miss it. 2 days ago, new reporting confirmed North Carolina is still waiting on billions in federal aid while automatic tax cuts march forward. Let me show you how this collision destroys a state budget. 3 numbers tell you everything. $60 billion, that's the total damage Hurricane Helene caused in North Carolina. $1.1 billion. That's how much North Carolina has already pulled from its rainy day fund to cover immediate disaster costs. $13 billion. That's how much the automatic tax cuts will cost annually by 2031. The state is bleeding money for disaster recovery while state law cuts off the revenue needed to pay for it. And it's not a choice, it's automatic. Let's start with the hurricane damage because the scale is hard to comprehend. Hurricane Helene made landfall in September 2024. The storm hit western North Carolina particularly hard. Entire towns flooded, roads washed away, bridges collapsed, homes destroyed, businesses gone. The total economic damage reached $60 billion across the affected areas. That's not just insured losses, that's total damage. Buildings, infrastructure, lost business revenue, agricultural losses, everything. North Carolina immediately started asking the federal government for help. The state submitted requests totaling $19.2 billion in federal disaster assistance. That's for rebuilding infrastructure, helping residents recover, repairing schools and hospitals, fixing roads and bridges, all the things you need federal money for after a disaster this size. By December 2025, the federal government had sent North Carolina $2.4 billion. That's less than 13% of what the state requested. There's another $4.6 billion that's been approved, but not actually dispersed. So theoretically, North Carolina is supposed to get $7 billion total, but only $2.4 billion has actually arrived. That leaves roughly $12 billion in requested aid that hasn't been approved yet. The state is waiting, communities are waiting, families whose homes were destroyed are waiting, and every month that passes without federal money means North Carolina has to cover more costs from state funds. The state's rainy day fund had money saved for emergencies. That's what rainy day funds are for. When Hurricane Helene hit, North Carolina started pulling from that fund. By the time we reached late 2025, the state had withdrawn $1.1 billion from reserves. A rainy day fund with $1.1 billion taken out is a rainy day fund that's $1.1 billion smaller for the next emergency. And North Carolina still has hurricane recovery costs that will continue for years. Roads that still need repair, families still displaced, businesses still closed. Now here's where it gets worse. While the state is spending down reserves and waiting for federal aid that keeps getting delayed, state tax law is about to cut revenue by billions annually. North Carolina passed tax reform legislation years ago that included automatic triggers. If state revenue growth hits certain thresholds, income tax rates automatically decrease. If revenue stays above those thresholds, corporate tax rates automatically decrease. Nobody has to vote on it. Nobody has to pass a new law. It just happens. The personal income tax rate in North Carolina was 4.25% recently. In 2026, it drops to 3.99%. If revenue thresholds continue to be met, it could drop to 3.49% in 2027. The corporate income tax rate was 2.5% in 2024. It dropped to 2.25% in 2025. It drops to 2% in 2026. Every time those rates drop, the state collects less revenue. When you collect less revenue while spending more on disaster recovery, your budget gap grows. Analysts project these automatic tax cuts will cost North Carolina $8 billion to $13 billion annually by 2031. Think about what that means. The state is trying to cover a $60 billion disaster. Federal aid isn't coming fast enough. The rainy day fund is shrinking, and state law is simultaneously cutting $8 billion to $13 billion in annual revenue. You can't solve that equation without something breaking. Either services get cut or local governments raise property taxes to replace lost state funding, or both. Here's what makes the automatic trigger mechanism so problematic. The law was written when the economy was growing and disaster recovery wasn't consuming state resources. Triggers were designed to return excess revenue to taxpayers during good times. But the triggers don't turn off during disasters. They don't pause during emergencies. If revenue hits the threshold, the cuts happen. Period. North Carolina's revenue growth hit essentially zero in fiscal year 2026. That means the state collected about the same amount of money this year as last year, but costs increased. Hurricane recovery costs, Medicaid enrollment growth, rising healthcare costs, infrastructure maintenance that got deferred during the pandemic. When revenue is flat and costs are rising, you have a deficit. The state projects revenue will actually be negative in fiscal year 2027. That means collecting less money next year than this year, and the automatic tax cuts make that worse. Let me break down what negative revenue growth means in practical terms. If the state collected $30 billion this year and projects collecting $29 billion next year, that's negative revenue growth. You're starting $1 billion behind before you even account for increased costs. Now add in the automatic tax cuts reducing revenue further, and add in ongoing hurricane recovery expenses, and add in reduced federal aid compared to what was requested. The deficit compounds. State officials can see this coming. Budget analysts have warned repeatedly that the combination of disaster costs and automatic tax cuts creates an unsustainable fiscal path. But changing the automatic trigger law requires the legislature to pass a new law. that's a political fight because some legislators support the tax cuts and oppose delaying them even during disaster recovery. The argument from tax cut supporters goes like this. The state shouldn't raise taxes or delay tax cuts just because there's a disaster. The tax cuts were promised to taxpayers. Breaking that promise punishes families and businesses. The state should cut spending instead or find efficiencies. The argument from those who want to delay the tax cuts goes like this. You can't recover from a $60 billion disaster while simultaneously cutting billions in state revenue. The tax cuts were designed for normal times, not disaster recovery. Delaying them temporarily until recovery is complete makes fiscal sense. I'm not picking a side here. I'm showing you both arguments because this is the political debate happening in North Carolina right now. And while that debate continues, the automatic cuts keep triggering because nobody has passed a law to stop them. Now let's talk about what happens when a state faces multi-billion-dollar deficits. North Carolina has three basic options: cut spending, raise other taxes, or borrow money. Each option has consequences. Cutting spending means reducing services. North Carolina already ranks 48th in the nation for per student education funding. That's near the bottom. The state spends less per student than almost every other state. That ranking is a direct result of years of tax cuts reducing the revenue available for education. If the state cuts education spending further to cover hurricane recovery costs and offset lost revenue from automatic tax cuts, per student funding drops even more. That means larger class sizes, fewer teachers, reduced programs, outdated textbooks, deteriorating school buildings. North Carolina's education funding problem illustrates a broader issue. When you cut state revenue through tax reductions, something has to give. Either services get cut or local governments raise property taxes to make up the difference, or both. Many North Carolina municipalities have increased property taxes in recent years. That's not because local officials want higher taxes. It's because state funding for local services decreased as state tax cuts reduced available revenue. When the state sends less money to cities and counties, those local governments either cut services or raise local taxes. So residents might see their state income tax bill decrease because of the automatic cuts, but their property tax bill increases because their city or county needs to replace lost state funding. The total tax burden doesn't necessarily decrease. It just shifts from state taxes to local taxes. Borrowing money to cover disaster costs is an option, but it comes with long-term consequences. When you borrow billions for disaster recovery, you're committing future budgets to debt service payments. Every dollar that goes to paying off disaster recovery bonds is a dollar that can't fund schools, roads, or other services in future years. North Carolina will likely use some combination of all three approaches. Some spending cuts, some local tax increases to replace lost state funding, some borrowing for disaster recovery. None of it solves the fundamental problem that the state is losing revenue through automatic tax cuts while facing enormous disaster recovery costs. The federal aid delay makes everything worse. When North Carolina requested $19.2 billion and has received only $2.4 billion as of December 2025, that $16.8 billion gap has to be covered somehow. The state can't just leave roads unrepaired or families in temporary housing indefinitely while waiting for federal money. So the state spends money on recovery expecting federal reimbursement eventually. But if that reimbursement doesn't come or
I think that one was too long because I want to get a lot more out. So that was 11 minutes with 25 minutes total. Unless you guys want me to finish the whole thing. Is North Carolina. I'm going to play some short videos for a bit.
Thiel, Donald Trump, Mark Zuckerberg, Jeff Bezos, or even Sam Altman, or any of these people who are involved in various love triangles with one another. And that billionaire is a guy named Larry Ellison. You may or may not have heard of him. He's the owner of Oracle, which is one of the largest cloud storage and software companies in the world. Last week, Larry Ellison surpassed Elon Musk as the richest man in the world after it was announced that his company Oracle would be making a $300 billion deal with OpenAI. Believe it or not, that's not even why we should be concerned. Larry Ellison's son has also been in the news recently for a merger that took place between his company Skydance and Paramount. David Ellison now owns and controls Paramount. Paramount controls a plethora of media and cable networks, including CBS News, Paramount Plus, MTV, Nickelodeon, Showtime, and plenty more, meaning that David Ellison is now in charge of distributing the media and entertainment that millions of people will be consuming. Last week, it was reported that David Ellison is considering bringing on board Barry Weiss, who is the founder of the publication called The Free Press. And let's all pretend to be shocked. She is extremely pro-Israel. Do me a favor and feign shock just one more time for me. David is considering appointing Barry Weiss the president or editor-in-chief of the CBS News division. Larry Ellison is also in hot pursuit of TikTok, and if a deal goes through between Ellison, China, and Trump, Ellison's company Oracle could be the new owner of TikTok. I think it goes without saying that this is an extremely powerful family. I'd say arguably the most powerful family who is shaping a lot of media discourse right now. If you look at all the interconnected elements between Paramount, CBS, TikTok, OpenAI, and ChatGPT, you begin to notice a centralization of power around this one family. I would watch out for this one billionaire who is now the richest man alive, as well as his son David, because I don't believe as many people know who he is compared to the other guys. And this family is about to have a lot of influence over the media landscape, what we consume as people, and what does and does not get censored on the internet. Comment below and let me know if you already knew who the Ellison family was, and if you were aware of all the different companies that they own in the media.
So that's a new lady on Telegram. Minute 40.
But it looks like the biggest emergency is actually happening inside the organization itself. First, let's talk about the silence from the very top. I mean, this is the governor's signature military group, right? But sources are saying DeSantis has been completely non-functioning when it comes to oversight. No visits, no talks with the teams. And get this, word is his chief of staff, Jason Wida, is intentionally protecting him to avoid any bad press. It's not just him either. Lieutenant Governor Jay Collins was apparently briefed on all these leadership failures months ago and, well, did nothing. Second, the reports coming from inside the Guard are pretty explosive. The executive director, Mark Thiem, is at the center of a toxic leadership scandal. We're seeing resignation letters from key people, like the chief pilot, detailing how Thiem spent over $64,000 of taxpayer money on personal flight training. And on top of that, allegations of sexual harassment cover-ups and firing commanders who refused unlawful orders. And finally, all this chaos is creating a huge operational risk. Experienced veterans and pilots are leaving in droves. Whistleblowers are flat out warning that the Guard is imploding and might not be ready for the next hurricane. So you've got loss of confidence letters piling up and funds allegedly misused. Yet the silence from Governor DeSantis suggests a critical disconnection from his own defense force. At some point, the governor's office is going to have to decide what's more important, protecting its image or protecting the Guard itself.
Okay, an update on Florida State fraud.
Justice Department to raid my newsroom. I was raided by the FBI in 2021. A couple of my reporters were held at gunpoint because someone sent us President Biden's daughter's diary. Since when does the FBI investigate abandoned diaries? It's completely absurd. It wasn't even a colorable crime in my case. And they raided my newsroom, got secret subpoenas. People may not know this, secret warrants. They went to Google, Microsoft, Uber, and Apple to obtain 8 years of photos, video, and email from my newsroom so they could go through it, purse through it, and leak it to the New York Times. This is a far more venial sin than arresting Don Lemon, who it appears as though the probable cause is public, the affidavits, the indictment's now public,
right?
That he did commit a crime. So crazy hypocrisy and double standards.
Yeah, and the rest of the media didn't seem to mind in 2021 when it happened to you. James, you went to Minneapolis, and I just want everyone at home to see what you were dealing with while you were there. Again, this video was taken in the middle of the day, broad daylight. Take a look.
They're everywhere. Shut the doors. Shut the door. Shut the doors. Whoa. We're press. We're press. Do you know what the First Amendment is? Amendment. No. They threw a frozen ice brick at the car.
All right, if it's like that during the day, what's it like at night? I know protesters, activists followed you to your car. They threw bricks at you. Tell us what it's really like there in Minneapolis right now.
Craig, I've never experienced anything like this in my life. I was getting out of the car. I happened to be there already the night before the shooting working on a project. And I got out of the vehicle. First of all, if you show up in an SUV, they automatically assume that you're feds. And I got out of the car, and 4 women, white women dressed in camouflage, demanded to see my identification. I'm on a public street in the city. I wasn't prepared for an alias or a cover, and they demanded to see my ID. And when I refused to show them my ID, they started screaming at us and getting violent. So there really is nothing you can do. People might think, well, bring a weapon. I mean, that'll quickly lead to escalate into a violent situation. You can't defend yourself. So the only thing you can do is retreat without engaging with them. This is I've never experienced anything like this. I've been to a lot of places. I've been to the border. But to be on a public street in a public place and having people demand to see your ID, there's a lot of irony in that.
In an American city, in the middle of the day, and you are a journalist, your team were texted death threats. I think we have one of them. This is the quote: "We know you're with O'Keefe and Nazis. You have 1 hour to leave or you're dead." How did they get that number? How did they get your vehicle's license plate? How did they know where you were staying? How did they have that information?
They have people on the inside everywhere. Your audience needs to understand how organized these people are. They are incredibly organized. So, for example, it appears as though they scanned our license plate, which was on the back of our SUV.
Right.
They must have someone inside the rental car agencies or the DMV in Minnesota. And they identified the driver of my car, did open source research, realized that he is my security. That's public information. His name is associated with mine. And then they tailed us. They followed us to our next hotel. They had someone inside the hotel working with them. So we could not escape. We couldn't lose our tail.
Were you able to check into that hotel?
What's that?
Were you able to check into that hotel?
No, we had to leave the hotel to another hotel. When we got to the next hotel, they were outside that hotel. So I think Nick Shirley experienced something very similar. There is no place that is safe for you to go, which is quite unlike. I've been to the border. I've filmed the cartel. I've never been in a situation where you can't escape these people. We had to leave the state of Minnesota to be safe. We had to go to Chicago and fly to Florida to escape. And that's, it's one thing to read about it, hear about it, to live it. In an American state, this is the United States of America. By the way, people say, where's the police? The police stood down because there's no incentive for the cops to do anything. Because if they do, they'll probably go to prison for the rest of their life acting in self-defense.
Well, we saw what happened with George Floyd. I want to play this soundbite for you. I think this is one of the most important soundbites out there right now, especially as it relates to the Somali fraud in Minneapolis. Your team went undercover and recorded this alleged FBI agent saying this. Take a look.
your job, like the FBI, do you think they're going to arrest people like that are dealing with the daycare stuff?
The thing with those cases is that I think by the time that case is done, even being like looked at, being ready to go to court, Trump won't even be in office.
Really?
Fraud cases like that, like money stuff,
Yeah.
years, literal years of time. Also, I don't think anybody would ever go to prison. Like, it would most likely be thrown out very quickly.
All right, so James, that's really shocking stuff. You reported yesterday that this guy's been fired. The FBI did put out a statement saying he doesn't speak or have firsthand knowledge of what the FBI is doing. But can you confirm that? And do you believe what he said, that the plan would be here to slow walk all of this Somali fraud investigation until there's a Democrat in the Oval Office?
I mean, I think it's very interesting the FBI fired him. I asked Ben Williamson, the spokesperson for the FBI, why did you fire him? And by the way, I think the FBI and the government should be thanking us if it's cleaning up their agency, their bureau. But the question is he telling the truth? We thought it was newsworthy what he was saying. That's why we published it. We got a lot of criticism for publishing it.
Right.
Or maybe is he a whistleblower? Is he an unwitting whistleblower? Is he saying the truth that he doesn't like? But either way, he's a security guy in the bureau, in the FBI, telling it apparently the way that it is. And I think people need to understand that the only way we're going to have accountability in this country is this type of citizen journalism, holding people to account who are in law enforcement. He might be speaking an unfortunate truth.
All right, James O'Keefe, appreciate you being here. Good to see you again. Thank you.
Thank you.
Okay, that was a very important one there. I got one more, one lady on TikTok. I think it's a new one.
Morning, it is gone. So let me recap and see if this one gets taken down. In the year 64, Rome burned for 3 straight days. Villages, shops, everything was just demolished by fire. So the emperor at that time was Nero, who was a sadistic, savage little bastard. So the rumor was he had his own city burned so that he could then turn around and accuse the Christians of doing it, which we all know from history. There's very little evidence that they did that, but there's a lot of rumor going around that he did it. So what did he do? He ordered them to run around and try to find all the Christians that they could. And then they wrapped them in material that would burn, but would burn slow. Then they dipped those people with that material in wax and tar, strapped them up high for post, and lit them to be used as torches. What today we call Roman candles, those things that you play with during the July the 4th holidays and January the 1st, and your children are lighting up a Roman candle, that's the name. It came from that. Now, how sick is that? How sick is that? I wonder in the future, are we going to have ice candles? So he has the festivity of games. And so the Roman people walk through the streets, drinking their wine, laughing with their friends, watching the festivities, while you've got humans up here burning to light their way. They laughed at them. They mocked them. They sit there and watched it. They enjoyed it. Don't forget Gladiator. Don't forget the era of Gladiator. We didn't think humans could be that cruel, did we? So now we've got people calling for the cartel to take out the ICE agents and cheering on the Mexican cartel. People that are known that if you piss them off over in their country, they don't take you out. They take out your family, your friends, your neighbors in a most horrific way. So we've got people cheering that on. Okay. We've got Olympians who have a right to speak their mind about America, but it's a privilege to be in the Olympics. They go over to Italy, which, by the way, you know what they do to protesters over in Italy? If you don't know, Google that. Little baby Iran, just a little bitty baby Iran. See, other countries don't put up with the shit like we do. You get out in the street acting like you're crazy, or even if you're not acting crazy, if you just out in the street because you don't like the government, that don't play well over there. So all of y'all spoiled asses out in the street doing all this shit, and America is allowing it. You are in a city. You are in a city. You are in a country where you are out there throwing frozen ice bottles, demolishing cars, doing crazy shit, and you're able to walk home every night, and we're fucking allowing it? I mean, this is unreal to me. But then you hate this country. You're protesting this country that's allowing you to do this stuff. Am I getting it right? And then you've got the ones that come from another country that are flying the flag from the country that they fled. Make that make sense. None of this makes sense. You've got American football, which is about as American as you can get, okay? So then they get a guy up there that is singing about satanic shit. If you go look at my other thing that I reposted, she deciphered the Spanish word since nobody knew what the fuck he was singing. So you got a guy playing for American football to a bunch of American guys and women, singing songs that we don't understand because we don't speak the language, and we're told you better learn the language. That is what's happening in America. Okay, so this morning I said some really sad things, and I'm going to say them again. I don't think we're going to win the midterms. I don't think we are, even though I want you to vote. I'm going to get out and vote. I'm going to do everything I can. I'm going to keep running my mouth. TikTok is shadow banning conservatives. How many liberal pages do you see where the liberals say that they are on their third, fourth, fifth, sixth account? You don't see any, but conservatives are. Every time conservatives get a large following, TikTok shuts them down. I'm on my last strike. All the liberals came at me. They even reported the videos of the cats. They did all this kind of crazy stuff. We are under siege. Conservatives are under siege. We are being silenced. We are being shut down. Our accounts are being taken down. But there's more stuff out there than TikTok. An eye-opener, a positive thing. How many friends do you have that are conservatives that are not on TikTok? Most of mine are not on TikTok because they don't like it. So when you see all this uproar out there and you think that they are the majority, they're not the majority. We are the majority, okay? We are the majority. But the momentum has started for the United States, just like back in the old days. You had the momentums, then it reset. Then you had the moment, then you reset. You had these things happen. You had the witches. You had the Muslims taking out the Christians. You had the Romans taking out the Christians. You had the Christians taking out people. Then it resets. I don't know if it's going to reset this time. I don't think that's going to happen. I think you guys need to open up your eyes and look around and see what's slowly being implemented. Let's don't forget Germany. Take care, guys.
So that was similar to the one she had earlier. I'm pretty sure that's another new one she had. Okay, I got a 10-minute one.
Department of Highway Safety and Motor Vehicles. They changed their policies. Now, all driver's license exams, whether that's non-commercial or commercial, will be administered in English. They set the deadline to last Friday. So this is the first weekend and Monday that this has been in effect. And there's a lot of details surrounding this that people have had questions about, but FHP, the Florida Department of Highway Safety, they said this is starting this week and moving forward. If you are taking a skills test or even it says a skills or a knowledge exam, both will be in English. Now, they did release a press release, and I'm going to read some of the wording for you. It says that previously knowledge exams for most non-commercial driver's license classifications were offered in multiple languages, while commercial learners permits and commercial driver's license knowledge exams were only available in English and Spanish. So under this updated new policy, all knowledge and skills tests will be conducted in English. Also, this eliminates the option for translation, which was given to people who wanted to get their driver's license here in Florida. Now, a big question about this, many people are wondering, in a state that 1/3 of its population, according to Census Bureau data, speaks another first language at home, and then also the officials told us during a press conference, 66% of people in Miami-Dade County, where we are now, use the test in Spanish. So clearly people were using this, but why the change? So I sat down with Governor Ron DeSantis and asked him what prompted this. And first of all, this was prompted after a accident that happened over the summer in August. And this is a video, an illegal migrant from India, Harjinder Singh, he was driving on a highway. I'm going to play that video for you, and you can see he was arrested for allegedly making that illegal U-turn right there. You probably saw us covering it very frequently on Fox News Channel. We did a lot of coverage on this back in August, and 3 people died. And he was reportedly not able to pass an English proficiency exam. And so this is what prompted the change that now people in Florida, whether you're getting a commercial driver's license or not, need to be doing it in English. So I want to respond. I want to share with you exactly what Governor Ron DeSantis said. So this is a bit of the interview. In response to this, what do you see moving forward as this is a big change?
Well, we had a fatal crash with a big rig that was California had issued commercial driver's license to they were illegally, but they didn't speak English. And they made a move that violated the road signs. And so people started thinking, like, why, if someone can't understand the road signs, why would they be given a driver's license? And, people are like, well, we don't do that in Florida. Well, it turned out that, there is written that are offered, not just in Spanish too. It's offered in Chinese, it's offered in Arabic. And the issue is like, people can speak what they want, but in Florida, our Constitution has English as our official language, and all of our road signs are in English. So just as a matter of safety, we thought it was pertinent to be able to follow the Constitution, which has commanded that, but also ensure motorist safety.
So this is directly linked to that accident that happened in August.
That's right.
Okay. Florida is a state where almost 30%. So he did confirm, yes. So this was a direct relationship to this crash that happened. Then I did ask him, okay, a third of the state speaks English at home. How is this going to affect drivers? And I think playing that also for you, and his response is interesting. So we'll do that. Speak another language at home. How do you think this is going to impact those drivers?
Well, I can tell you, you think about 15, 16-year-olds that take their driver's test. I would imagine that, 99+% are going to be able to do it in English. Some of them may also be able to do it in another language, but our school system is equipped to make sure that you're prepared to be in English. And so I'm very, very confident of that. And so the people that are, the 15, 16 are looking to get
you
that
guys
first
hear it
license,
okay?
I don't think that you're going to see much of a difference. I think that you may see a difference in preference. Maybe someone did prefer to do a different language, but clearly they're given the tools to know English in our school system.
And do you expect any legal pushback from this decision?
Every time I get out of bed, we get sued on something. I mean, that happens. And so obviously, I'm sure there will,
So there hasn't been any legal pushback that we've seen so far, but as the governor mentioned, he is expecting that as well. Now, looking at local reports of what people are saying, a lot of them at the DMVs, we know that many rushed to get to the DMV when this announcement was made. It was made about a week before the deadline. So the deadline was February 6th. So people either made appointments or tried to get to the DMV to do that before the February 6th deadline. That was on Friday. We did hear from officials that they are doing a 60-day grace period. These are for people only taking the test in Spanish. As you heard Governor Ron DeSantis mention that this was offered in many different languages, but the grace period is only offered to those in Spanish. And then they're also only offered to drivers who made a specific appointment before that February 6th deadline. So there's a little bit of a stipulation in terms of who can take it, but that's the latest that we're hearing people at the DMV say. Some people say, this is going to be really tough for people that English isn't their first language and they're still learning and they didn't really have enough time to be able to study for it. While others at the DMV said, if the roads are in English, the drivers need to also understand them and be able to drive safely with the understanding of that language. So I think there's a debate on both sides of this topic. Regardless, the announcement was made and this change is being held out at DMVs all over the state of Florida. The Miami-Dade tax collector, they're the ones that are tax collectors throughout the state, but the Miami-Dade tax collector, he spoke to press on Friday when this all launched, and he said that they are pushing forward with these rules. They're working with the state to make sure that they're in compliance, and they've also recognized that there is a lot of Spanish speakers here in this area, and so they are trying to accommodate that with that 60-day grace period. So, I think this came as a shock to many, but also if you've been following what happened in Florida, especially over the summer with the commercial driver's license and somewhat of a controversy around that, you probably aren't too surprised that Florida made a decision to switch to English only. Now, there are a couple of other states that are also in the same boat, that they only allow these tests to be given in English. That's Oklahoma, Wyoming, and South Dakota. So now Florida is the 4th state to join this rule. I know we have some moderators back at Fox that if there's any questions that I can answer, they can text me those. Okay, is Florida the first state to implement this exam? We're going to see this English only pop up in other states. So I just answered that. So we have, but only 4. So, that's not a lot of states. We could maybe see other states follow suit. I know Florida is somebody who really paves the way for certain policies, and they do a good job at wanting to have other states, follow suit. Governor Ron DeSantis actually mentioned that to me in my interview when we were speaking, that other states he hopes will follow. But of course, that's that.
So what do you think of that update? That's a good idea.
Uncovered and will describe to you this evening may very well be the final blow to Mark Carney's political career. Once you realize what he has done and what he is doing, you will realize we are in a catastrophic death spiral, and he is making a ludicrous amount of money in the process. I'm going to preface this and tell you a little bit about Mark Carney because it's important information. I will keep this as simple as possible so it is easy to understand, and I will use analogies to simplify it further on the end so you can grasp exactly what has been going on. So Mark Carney championed net zero. He started GFANZ in the UK in 2019. The accumulated total of the capital access was over $130 trillion. His net zero actually started to collapse when Republican attorneys started to subpoena banks in the U.S. over anti-competition regulations. JP Morgan Chase, Bank of America, Citigroup, Wells Fargo, Goldman Sachs, and so forth all exited net zero. So he championed de-risking green energy investment because there's no return on green energy. You'll be a decade to 2 decades before it's actually profitable, if ever. And this is very important because what you do is you take federal funds, taxpayer funds, you absorb all of the liability and cost to make sure that the investment succeeds, and you offer this as a guarantee so the private investors will come and invest in that project. Bloomberg announced in 2020 that Carney was the unofficial economic advisor to Trudeau. Since he is unpaid and unofficial, it does not trigger the Conflict of Interest Act, and he has complete influence over Trudeau's policy with zero consequence. So the 3 key figures are Chrystia Freeland, Justin Trudeau, and Mark Carney. Chrystia Freeland being the finance minister. From 2020 to 2025, approximately $190 billion has been allotted to de-risk green energy investment. Now, the problem comes when GFANZ is collapsing, that $130 trillion disappears. There's only one place that you can access that kind of capital as cash on hand, and that is a country's pension fund. So through Trudeau, he created all the de-risk policy. Through Freeland, who Trudeau appointed, and remember, Mark Carney is the godfather for child, the Canadian Growth Fund is created for $15 billion, which is used to de-risk green energy investment. Stick with me here because this is very important. The public service pension has very strict regulations for investing. It is only applicable to very low risk and typically an IRR compounding return. So you can't take pension money and de-risk green energy investment, and you can't use it to invest in green energy because it's typically a net loss. However, Mark's first transition fund, Brookfield Growth Transition Fund 1, later renamed 2, has PSP pension funds and Ontario Teachers pension funds as limited partners LLPs in that transition fund. Oh, that's why that's in there. And I thought, how did he get pension funds into that transition fund? Trudeau, obviously. All the board members of the Public Service Pension and the Canadian Growth Fund are selected through a process of the Treasurer and the Finance Minister. At the end of the day, the Prime Minister gets final approval. These individuals are paid between 6 and 7 figures, and the Prime Minister can remove them at any time without cause. Do you think you would listen to me if I can remove your 7-figure salary just like that? Yet these management systems are considered bipartisan. They are a political tool. The PSP also created a subsidiary called the CCFIM that manages that $15 billion Canadian Growth Fund. Try not to lose me here. So the final close on the Brookfield Transition Fund 2, which Mark managed with Teskey, is $20 billion. And there is another transition fund with contracts with the UAE called the Catalytic Transition Fund for billions of dollars as well. Because this is routed through subsidiaries, disclosure becomes obscured. Now we're going to get to the smoking gun. This is just one example. Brookfield makes an initial investment of $300 million from this transition fund into Entropy Inc. in Canada. That is now a majority stake, and because it's not an investment in profit return, it meets the threshold for the PSP, which is your pension money. So a typical management fee at Brookfield for the entire fund is between 1.5 and 2%. What generally happens is as 100% of the capital is returned, I say returned, but you don't actually return the funds, there's then a 5 to 8% hurdle after that. There's a catch-up phase where Brookfield will collect 20%, and then after that, there's an 80-20 split to the pension fund, which is the LLP, the limited partner. I should put that in the beginning. So the typical time frame and thresholds for Mark Carney to collect on that extraordinary 20% could take up to 10 to 15 years. And now comes the magic. They used the Canadian Growth Fund to de-risk the entire project on a contract for 15 years on a guarantee for $16 million a year and $200 million up front. That means all liability, all debt, and all carrying right to the finish line is taken on by the Canadian taxpayer. So we would support the project right to the end, be at a net loss as the completed project belongs to a foreign entity who collects all of the profits and reaps all of the rewards. If you didn't think that was bad enough, here is the nick. When a government contract de-risks the investment, it is legally binded and can be front-loaded immediately, which means that 15-year valuation that is down the road occurs instantaneously, jumps the hurdle, and the 20% kicks in immediately. So not only are we at a net loss, the project will be foreign owned, and we have debt for the next 15 years, and Carney gets paid immediately. Do you have any idea what the 20% payout plus management fee, even after you pay the other managers and the dividends are separated, just for Mark Carney? If he is able to de-risk the entire platform, and he's doing it right in front of your eyes, we are de-risking the UAE commitments, and the UAE has the contract with the Catalyst Transition Fund that he also managed. The maximum dollar amount is between $750 million to $1.2 billion. If you didn't notice immediately after the budget was passed, all of these commitments start rolling in because they're all being de-risked. And the incredible part is this. He took your pension money, because you can't take tax money. It's not there. There's no pile of cash. Put it in a fund to attract other investors. It is a perfect circle, a snake eating its tail. And at the end of it, there's a net loss. We don't own the product. We don't own the profits. We'll get a little bit of tax and maybe some jobs. And Mark Carney will be a billionaire. That's like me taking all the money in your bank account, holding on to it to invest, taking half your check when you get it, taking 5% to put back in this money I took from you, and then keeping the rest. I hope you understand, as this continues, this is the ratio change that the parliamentary budget officer is talking about. The debt is not only escaping the GDP, it's a contractual obligation for up to 20 years in some cases, meaning you can't escape. We are going to reach a no escape velocity, and even if you get him out of office, the damage cannot be recovered from. I have my suspicions that Chrystia Freeland was fully aware that this was going on, potentially has her own investments offshore, and she got the hell out as fast as she could when that last budget dropped, because Trudeau's budget was Carney's budget. Trudeau, Freeland, Mark Carney, complicit across the board. And if any member of that PSP fund signed an LPA, that's the limited partnership agreement, with simple interest instead of compound interest, which is the standard IRR, they're going to have a big problem because I ran the numbers upside down and backwards to see how fast I could make my money if I were Mark Carney and I was influencing the policy, and I would have put in simple interest annually versus compound because your front load becomes even faster. So every time we de-risk a project for 10 to 15 years, the firm like Brookfield front loads the entire contract for the full 15 years because it's black and white and jumps straight to the finish line to get paid instantly. Think about that. Guys, I'm not talking about a little bit of money. The $6 million in stocks that they talk about, they told you that on purpose. Because when the Brookfield representative was in the House being questioned recently, who was clearly trembling, mentioned the stocks, but he also said carried interest, which means your guy Mark Carney is going to be a billionaire. Do you understand why he came to Canada? Because he spent 4 years building this and trying to access our pension funds because it's cash on hand. He needed it. That's what he was after the entire time. And I said it, and he literally said it in a press conference the other day and mentioned the $2 trillion. If you think it might be a coincidence, I ran a statistical analysis on the probability of all of those policies landing and those investments occurring in that exact chronological order. And it would be the same as if you built a plane, I built a runway, and you accidentally landed on that runway and not even knew where it was. It is impossible. It was facilitated by Carney, Trudeau, and Chrystia Freeland, and Carney actually did it all because Trudeau is as dumb as a bag of bricks, which I've said. This is cascade payment, and I've left out about 1,000 details that would just overcomplicate it all for you, but all you need to know is that it's a snake eating its tail. It's a completely false payback on our own pension funds with our tax money. Pension, tax money. This is what's happening. Go ahead and look it up. Send this to your friends. Send this to any economist that you know.
Okay. News update from Canada News there. Billy Bean time, 21 minutes on the first one.
Time in Texas about 2 p.m. Some of the things we'll cover, some of the sources I'll use: Martin Armstrong, Cyber Cuba, Stephen Gardner, Best and Taylor, plus. Some of the things we'll cover: banks collapse, China, Cuba, Iran. And the U.S. Could hit Iran possibly Wednesday or Thursday of this week. What happens if the Strait of Hormuz is closed and is not shipping oil out of the Middle East? This could be catastrophic to both China and Europe. So let's get started. So we have, okay. So now all of what we're seeing the U.S. do militarily harkens back to the presidential election of 2020 and the coup we saw in the U.S., perpetrated by the deep state via many foreign nations: Canada, Cuba, Venezuela, China, Iran. And we see the U.S. making strikes and targeting on these nations, both economically and in some cases militarily. So we have everything and the right position to make America great again. We have God, the American people who are both a praying and an armed people, and we have President Trump. So yeah, it appears everything is going along the way it should to bring the maximum benefit to America and ultimately to the world, because of that coup and the presidential election in America 2020, by the Smartmatic software, the Dominion vote counting machines, not only has affected America, but 71 other nations over the past 20 years. Many times we would see election results and wonder, how did that person get in both the US and around the world when the people were behind another person? Well, now we know it's because the votes have been controlled by the deep state in a global plan. So, yeah, it's time for that to go away, isn't it? So let's see what we see going on now. Okay, so we've got the U.S., we've got what's going on here. We've got Mexico, Venezuela, Cuba. Then we've got Africa. We've got the Middle East, Iran. And Iran has this location, the Strait of Hormuz, where much of the world's oil is shipped from the Middle East, from Saudi Arabia and UAE and other Middle Eastern countries besides Iran. Does pass through this waterway, Strait of Hormuz. This is the Persian Gulf. Down here we have the Gulf of Oman. Okay, so that's going on. Now, as I mentioned, the U.S. Has a target list of nations: Canada, Cuba, Venezuela, China, Iran, and other nations who engaged in this coup in 2020. That's a primary list of nations on America's hit list. And we see in Cuba, so we know President Trump has taken control of the oil from Venezuela, and we see President Trump in the process of taking control of the oil in Iran. So Cuba was getting most of their oil from Venezuela, which has been cut off. Now Cuba is out of jet fuel. They can not service international flights going into the Jose Marti International Airport in Havana. They put out a NOTAM. It's effective February 10 at 5 p.m. So we know we have a dateline situation. It's going to be in effect February 10 through March 11 at least for 1 month. And Cuba puts out this message to jets, commercial airlines, and cargo planes, and so on, out of Jet A1 fuel. So that's going on. And Cuba, we understand, is also in a blackout. We have this from Stephen Gartner. Okay, so recently, part of this coup in the 2020 presidential election in the U.S. also involved voter fraud at the state level.
There's a Harbor Freight store in your neighborhood where we sell hardworking tools that always work with any.
We know recently the FBI and DNI Tulsi Gabbard went to Fulton County, Georgia, and secured 700 boxes of election returns for 2020. So some were saying, why was Tulsi Gabbard there? How did she get involved? Well, Tulsi Gabbard came out and brought up an executive order by Obama. Remember him? He's a Democrat. And Obama put out this executive order that the DNI, it's their job to secure elections in the U.S. if foreign interference is believed to have occurred. Now, the funny part is the dirty, stinky, commie Dems, have been trying to hitch to President Trump. He couldn't get elected in 2020. That was Russia, 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 which has been thoroughly disproven. But Obama put this executive order out involving the DNI and U.S. state elections, believing that the Dems would be able to stop President Trump. But hey, it's flipped right now. Because, yes, the Dems were involved in the U.S. presidential coup in 2020. But at any rate, there is substantial law that foundates the involvement of the Director of National Intelligence, Tulsi Gabbard, in state elections. And the 2020 event also involved Venezuela, Cuba, Iran, China, and so forth, as put forth by a geopolitics analyst, Roger Stone, who's been involved in U.S. politics for decades. So, yeah. And we see America, God, the American people, and President Trump coming after these same nations. Now we have this. February 8th, today's the 9th. Yesterday, we had 112 C-17 troop carriers going to the Middle East, reminiscent of the U.S. military buildup before Desert Storm. So that's going on. W77 put that out. Tulsi TV. The Ayatollah on Sunday missed a significant Iranian military ceremony. Well, of course he did. He's either deep inside his bunker or he has already left Iran. So that's going on. And we have this about Iran. Okay. So we have that the U.S. has positioned in Iran. We have 50,000 U.S. troops there now. 50,000. That goes along with 112 C-17s on Sunday. And we have several carrier strike groups. We have one nuclear armed strike group. We have also nuclear, I don't know if they're armed. No, I believe the submarines in that area are armed with Tomahawks. We have 12 plus warships there, 35 Strike Eagles. We have the B-2s pre-positioned on Diego Garcia. So that's going on. And that sudden buildup of troops Sunday is a big tip-off, I believe. And we have this. So we have Scott Bessent, the head of the U.S. Treasury, giving a report to the Senate that the Iran is out of money. Its banks have collapsed. And we have also those individuals still inside Iran are wiring money out like crazy. The Ayatollah and the Ayatollah's son just wired out over the weekend $328 million. It's only the top elite who still have money. The banks have collapsed for the people of Iran. So Iran's banks have collapsed, and we have some intel. It's highly likely that the U.S. will hit Iran Wednesday or Thursday. And that February 7, a few days ago, oil was at $63 a barrel. It's believed, now this information came out in the last 48 hours. So oil was $63 a barrel. It's believed that if there is a peace deal between the U.S. and Iran, it will go down to $50 a barrel. And no peace deal, it will go up to $70 a barrel. I have more information on that. And the price of oil per barrel. We have this also, that there are going to be more talks in Oman Monday and Tuesday. So we have Oman down in this area. This is Oman, right across the Persian Gulf from Iran. There's going to be more talks between Iran and the U.S. if Iran comes in there with the same points they had as the previous talk.
He's an animal in the back.
The U.S. delegation is prepared to walk out, and that will lead to the final steps by the U.S. military to strike Iran militarily on Wednesday or Thursday. So that's going on. And we're hearing a part of the plan is for Israel to hit Parchin. That's a lab where they make detonators. And for the U.S. to hit Fordow. Fordow was hit by the B-2 strike several months ago by the U.S., which took out the entrance to that facility. But it's believed that Iran has gone back to that facility and has begun enrichment of uranium again. This time, Fordow will be completely destroyed. The U.S. military will also hit Pickaxe Mountain, which is a very deep Iranian facility south of Natanz. And the U.S. wants to destroy it before centrifuges are installed.
When premium ingredients come together, memories are made forever. Fannie Mae, together is timeless.
The way you see an idea in your mind.
So that's going on. And we have this, Martin Armstrong, globally famous economist, more about closing the Strait of Hormuz. Now, Martin says this would dramatically increase the cost of oil per barrel to $240 per barrel. And that closing would be catastrophic to both China and Europe. So we're finding out that from the Middle East, the U.S. gets, according to Martin, 3% of our oil. So 3%, the U.S., we drill a baby drill inside the U.S., 3% reduction, we could make that up from other nations or from our strategic oil reserve. The U.S. is not going to be hurt by the closing of the Strait of Hormuz. China and Europe will take major hits.
Go to 8:30.
And it's 80% of the oil that passes through the Strait of Hormuz that goes to China. Europe receives 25% of their oil from the Strait of Hormuz on a daily basis. Now, China does have an alternate route, part of its Silk and Belt Road initiative. Across Iran, China had built a railroad. China could get some oil shipped over the railroad, but not nearly the amount that it receives via tankers through the Strait of Hormuz. Either way, China and Europe are going to be smacked down. if the Strait of Hormuz is closed. Now, Martin Armstrong says if the Strait of Hormuz closes, the impact on China would take the oil up to $140 per barrel. That's just closing the Strait of Hormuz. So Martin Armstrong predicts close the Strait of Hormuz, oil goes up to $140 per barrel. If war breaks out between U.S., Israel, and Iran, then the price of oil per barrel on a global basis will go up to $240 per barrel. The nations who are going to suffer the most from this increase in price of oil per barrel will be China and Europe. We have this from Best and Taylor. Yep. So we currently have in Mexico, according to the intel that Best and Taylor have, and I know several years ago, I had intel from multiple sources also supporting this. 1 million military-age men in Mexico. Where are they from? They're from China and they're from Iran. And they're just waiting for the go signal.
Not over.
In Mexico to invade the U.S. So, yeah, we'll have our hands full, won't we? It's good God is on our side. We have this from Fox News that we had President Trump putting a quarantine on all oil leaving Venezuela. So he cut Cuba off. He's taken down the amount that China receives. So that's going on. Since he took over the Caribbean, took out Maduro, he put a quarantine on Venezuela sanctioned oil tankers. We had one outrun the U.S. military, but it has finally been seized. And this happened in the Indian Ocean, way on the other side of Iran, near India. The Aguilar 2, the U.S. military has seized it. President Trump put a quarantine on the oil tankers, sanctioned oil tankers from Venezuela. Now, just in the past 3 days, President Trump has also put a sanction on 14 oil tankers operated by Iran. So President Trump is not only cutting off oil coming out of Venezuela, the U.S. military will also cut off oil sanctioned by the U.S. coming out of Iran. And the biggest hits by the U.S. controlling oil from Iran is going to be China and Europe. So that's going on. It's good to be in prayer for America, President Trump, the U.S. military, and world peace. I love you, and I'll see you soon.
Okay, I don't know. Each day changes too much. I always change my mind. I guess we're just gonna, I guess 2 shows, I don't know. A lot of stuff for now. I think 1 show, I think. So I'm gonna do a few more short ones, and then tomorrow evening I won't be able to get to the second.
Slip up. It's a full-blown global embarrassment that might have just ended any hope he had for the White House. He strolls in, tries to show off for world leaders, and somehow manages to ridicule the entire planet while apparently forgetting what planet he's even on. Honestly, he looks like he's in a different time zone, one that does not involve sobriety. Wait until you see this. And now breaking, Newsom has reportedly been denied entry into the U.S. House while in Davos. All those details are coming up. Plus, Kristi Noem, she weighs in on whether Don Lemon will actually face consequences for the stunt he pulled inside a church. Hit that like button if you think Gavin Newsom should never touch the White House, and subscribe to make sure you don't miss the day's hottest political news. Now, before we get to the video that has everyone talking, where Gavin Newsom looks like he's not exactly sober, let me show you how this whole dumpster fire started. Gavin Gaslight Newsom, he rolls into Davos, ready to lecture the world on Donald Trump and billionaires, all while hanging out with the crazy son of the foreign billionaire who jets around posting pictures of the Democrats he bought. And just yesterday, Ted Cruz, he posted a more appropriate version of this photo. Let's be real. Gavin works for Soros, and he proved it on the global stage, hitting every single Soros talking point, telling European leaders to stand up to America, fight back, and basically undermine U.S. security, all while pretending he's some kind of tough independent statesman.
And stop being complicit. It's time to stand tall and firm, have a backbone. I can't take this complicity. People rolling over. I should have brought a bunch of knee pads for all the world leaders. And I hope people understand how pathetic they look on the world stage. I mean, at least from an American perspective, it's embarrassing. Oh, this is diplomacy with Donald Trump. He's a T-Rex. You mate with him or he devours you.
The guy crying about crowns, that's the same guy who quietly funded a bust of himself inside San Francisco's City Hall. So there's that. And since when is it okay for a governor to jet overseas and tell other countries to pick a fight with America? Some might call that treason. But Gavin Newsom, he claims the world leaders thanked him for that little pep talk.
You criticized world leaders when you got here, saying that some of these European leaders have capitulated to the president.
In the past,
you said
you
you should have brought knee pads. What have you heard from them since then?
A lot. I heard a surprising number say, "Glad you made those comments." The exact opposite of what you might expect. They needed to hear those comments.
What should terrify every American is how easily this guy can just make stuff up. I mean, there's no way these world leaders ran up to Gavin Newsom and thanked him for calling them out. Zero chance. And honestly, maybe those knee pads would have been useful while he was groveling for approval from his master. Gavin Newsom.
Okay, part one.
Before. You ready for this? Roll it.
I think it's very, very ironic that Governor Newsom, who strikes me as Patrick Bateman meets Sparkle Beach Ken, may be the only Californian who knows less about economics than Kamala Harris. He's here this week with his billionaire sugar daddy, Alex Soros, and the Davos is the perfect place for a man who, when everyone else was on lockdown, when he was having people arrested for going to church, he was having $1,000 a night meals at the French Laundry. And I'm sure the California people won't forget that.
Wow. And no, we will never forget. His kids went to school, Nancy Pelosi got her hair done, while the rest of us were locked down. Some even arrested for surfing or just going to church. And now Gavin flailing like he's trying to win a knife fight with the president? Well, Trump strolls in and he puts him in his place masterfully. Total checkmate moment. Watch this.
Gavin's a good guy. And we're going to, if he needed it, I would do it in a heartbeat. I'd love to see. We did help them a lot in Los Angeles, a lot with the early in my term when they had some problems. But we would love to do it. I will say this, if I were a Democrat governor or whatever, I would call up Trump. I'd say, come on in, make us look good. Because we're cutting crime down to nothing. And we're taking people out, career criminals who are only going to do bad things, and we're bringing them back to their countries.
Just another boss level Trump move. Trump doesn't clap back, doesn't insult the hair, doesn't mention the French Laundry. He just says, Gavin's a good guy. I want to help him clean up California. Well, suddenly the trolling collapses. Because what do you do with that? You can't scream dictator when the guy just offered to take out your trash. Newsom comes in swinging. Trump sidesteps, pats him on the head. and says, call me when you're ready to fix the place. That's the difference. One guy is chasing a viral moment. The other shuts the whole thing down by winning without throwing a punch. This is why Trump is on the world stage and not Newsom. And yet, the governor apparently learned nothing from the master troller. Watch this next clip. Newsom continues to hurl weak insults at Trump after the speech. Watch his pauses, his facial expressions. Many are already speculating he's not sober. Now, this is just the opening act. This one isn't as obvious. The real proof comes in the clips that follow. But first, watch this.
You were obviously named by President Trump during that speech.
Yeah.
What was your reaction to what he had to say about you?
None. I think he said something very different last night. I didn't hear new scum. I heard new green scam. But I mean, come on, it was remarkably boring. It was remarkably insignificant. He was never going to make.
Destroyed it.
Hey, last part 3. Got a few more.
Interview. And boy, is he being awfully critical of the president's speech after he himself turned down the opportunity to speak in Davos.
I was told he was asked to give a speech on his signature policies, but he's not speaking because what have his economic policies brought? Outward migration from California, a gigantic budget deficit, the largest homeless population in America, and the poor folks in the Palisades who had their homes burned down. He is here hobnobbing with the global elite while his California citizens are still homeless. Shame on him. He is too smug, too self-absorbed, and too economically illiterate to know anything.
Thank you very much.
Let me know if you need any further clarification.
Bessent does not take prisoners, and he does it with a smile. But he's 100% correct. What does Gavin even have to run on besides destruction? Nothing. And maybe that's why he was hitting the sauce before the CNN interview. Watch what happens next. CNN tries to continue their usual fake narrative that President Trump is suffering cognitive decline. You know, the storyline they ignored for 4 years. Well, Caitlin Collins, she's all of a sudden suddenly concerned that Trump, juggling multiple domestic and global crises with probably zero sleep, might have accidentally mixed up Greenland and Iceland. And then watch Gavin start to respond. This is where it gets bizarre.
Did it stand out to you that he said Iceland multiple times when he was talking about Greenland?
And that every time a windmill turns, it costs $1,000. A lot of stuff stands out. None of this is normalized. There's a normalization of deviancy of consciousness and, comments and commentary. No other president, he's held to the curve. He's graded on a curve. I mean, it's really some jaw-dropping and remarkable statements that just, fly in the face of facts and evidence and common sense.
This is not typical Gavin Newsom behavior. I mean, that opening about the windmills, honestly, it reminded me of Joe Biden rambling. The man is either completely exhausted or he's been drinking. Either way, it's not a good look. And his attempt to insult the president, they only get worse. And this time he ends up contradicting himself spectacularly. See if you can catch it.
For the European audience, that may have been a new speech. My God, there wasn't anything new about that speech for the American audience. The only thing that was new is he said he's willing to negotiate, but wait a sec, that's not new either, because he's been saying we've wanted to negotiate for over a year.
Let's unpack that. First, he slams Trump for finally saying he's willing to negotiate. Then he immediately contradicts himself, claiming nothing was new here because, in his words, Trump's been talking about negotiating for over a year. And you're worried about Trump mixing up Greenland? I'm telling you, the guy is not playing with a full deck.
Okay, that's our TikTok lady. I got 2 new ones here. 2 short ones, you got 2.5.
Has been listed that I have known and met in my days in Hollywood always seemed like a trash bag. Couldn't put your finger on it, but made you feel uncomfortable. Just that sleazy vibe, a way about talking to or grabbing a woman that you don't know. I digress. There's one person who is one of two of the nastiest people that I've ever met in Hollywood. And that is a statement. Both of them are publicists, and one is named Peggy Siegel. Her name keeps coming up around Ghislaine and around E. And guess what? She was the nastiest bitch I ever met. So I was dating Kevin Mazur, big famous photographer, first pictures of John Mayer and Jessica Simpson when they were together. We went to Hawaii to see Pearl Jam and U2 with the band. We were with the band, hanging with Laird and Gabby. Took me to the Victoria's Secret fashion show, the Billboard Awards, to Rome to go be with Billy Joel, and Bryan Adams opened up for him when he performed in front of hundreds of thousands of people at the Coliseum in Rome. Like this guy, when I was nobody. So one night in the Hamptons on a weeknight, like he invites me to a movie premiere, and not even the premiere, it's a screening. And I get to go to the after party because I'm uninvited to the screening. And it's at the Blue Parrot in East Hampton. And it's like a little dive Mexican restaurant, nothing. Mason jars and tequila, like my favorite. So I'm there, and this woman with this short haircut and these big buggy eyes is like fixated on me. She's just like irritated that someone that's not at the level is there, and I wasn't invited. And so she's totally fixated. You could see her like, wait, who is it? Who is that? Who invited her? Why is she here? Why is she here? It wasn't packed. So she has me thrown out. And I go out into the parking lot with my mason jar, my frozen margarita under my shirt, feeling like a friggin' loser. I was nobody. I had nothing. I had a pot to piss in, not a penny. Didn't know anyone. I was so excited. I was just in there to have fun, get my buzz on. And she was a see you next Tuesday. And you know what? She was a bitch. But karma's a bigger bitch. You're welcome. So these e-files.
Okay. Lady, that New Hollywood people. I got one more short one, you guys.
People are still walking around out there. All these politicians, actors, actresses, everybody. So you think they're out there and justice has not been served. You think the military's out there saving these children, what these military guys are going through and what they've been going through for years now, trying to save them. And you think that they're going to save the children but not lock these people up in the spa in Cuba, and justice is not going to be served. Do you really, really think that? Come on now. It's a military sting. You know this. Some of you know this. It's an operation going on. Yeah, these people have been dealt with. They're long gone.
Hope this is okay.
We're looking at doubles. We're looking at masks.
He's right.
We're looking at clones. These people are gone. They're gone. You can tell by looking at them, these are not the originals. It's so easy to see. 95% of Hollywood, you can tell, is they're not the originals. Same with politicians. They're all gone. They've been dealt with, and rightfully so. The torture that they've put children through, and babies, and women, they're gone. And like I said, rightfully so. They're gone. So don't worry about them being taken care of. There's a handful of military sitting right at the top controlling all of this. They're the ones that are really in charge. And they've dealt with them. Believe me, these people are not walking around. They're long gone. And I don't mean they're sitting over there. I mean, they're gone. So don't worry about it.
So that's a good one, important there to end the show with. Okay, guys. When is this movie going to end? So, yeah, we'll play it day by day. And so tomorrow afternoon, evening. Have a good night, everybody. Thanks. Lucy, Tim, Carol, Flying Eagle, and Kay, get some rest. And last member, please hit the like And stay safe, stay strong, keep the faith, and never give up. Still, you guys, make sure you sign into the backup channels in the description box, please. Thank you, and signing off till tomorrow. Chico dude.